Hello, those of you that have a Vespa GTS may be interested in this next section. What we're going to show you is the chassis pretty much stripped down to its bare bones. We have some issues, well not we, the Vespa have some issues with the amount of corrosion on these chassis, and we'll get a better look into where that corrosion starts and why it starts. So that you can be aware of what you need to do in order to prevent the rot from degrading the chassis to a point where it could affect the structural integrity of the chassis. So let's move over to the scooter itself, and we'll be able to show you in better detail what we're talking about. Okay, so what you can see here is the Vespa GTS with all the ancillaries removed: engine out, seat out, tank out, radiators. These are the radiators here. This is the left-on radiator with the regulator attached to it and the water bottle. These radiators basically sit in this area here, like that. There's only one fan on these. There's a pair of radiators linked together with pipes. These taking air from the front here and vent out through the side of the glove box, as you can see there, through these vents here. That's how the water cooling system works on these machines. But we're not going to use any of that. We're going to do something different with that. So going back to what we were talking about, as you can see, we've got a fairly advanced stage of corrosion here. The paint is flaking away on one of the rails here which supports the plastic runner. You can also see rust down the seams all the way along here. The other side's just as bad. I don't know if we can catch that, but you can see where the battery sits also. We've got paint coming away, probably due to some acid spill, but again, more likely we've got salt and grit ingress which gets into every part of the chassis here in the UK. They tend to salt the roads quite well here in the winter, and if this isn't cleaned on a regular basis, then once it gets underneath the paint, it effectively starts to rot everything away. I mean, you've got these plastic clips and some screws and things going on from the factory. When they're pushing these through, they're doing this after the bikes have been painted. They've got very limited amount of paint on there. They don't tend to put much paint on there, as you can see. This is behind the leg shield. And what I was saying is, these clips here, when they get pushed in, it tends to push the paint out. You can scratch the paint. That leaves the metal then exposed. You get a little bit of salt and water in there, and it sits there because it's held underneath the plastic tray. It doesn't really get a chance to dry out, and then effectively what happens, it gets underneath the paint, and then you start to get this corrosion. This particular part here isn't an integral part of the frame strength, but this seam here is. So, you know, the last thing you want is for that to start getting to a point where it's going to compromise the chassis strength. So that's what you need to be aware of. So you need to get plastics off on this on a regular basis, maybe say every 6 months, and have a look at this. Treat that with wax oil or some sort of corrosion preventative substance, and that will aid the duration of your chassis. Okay, so going back onto the project, we mentioned, as you can see, there's not a lot of paint in there. That's just rusting out there. Yeah, we mentioned we were going to cut the leg shields down, like so. We've had another thought since, and what we've decided to do is to take a 40mm strip off all the way across there, which would bring the height of the leg shields down to about here. This will obviously mean shortening the horn cover as well, which will remove the relevant material section out of that and plastic weld that back up. So yeah, that's going to get dropped, but in doing so we'll need to reduce the length of this stem. This stem is what carries obviously the handlebar top. This will be cut with a pipe cutter once the leg shields have been removed, so we'll get a nice clean square cut. We'll then make an adapter piece which will take this bearing, that'll form a housing in this tube where this bearing race then will sit into, so we'll get a nice square fitment and location back into the steerer tube. The fork column which comes through the steerer tube, that will be cut somewhere down here, obviously when it's out of the frame. As you can see, there's a hole that runs right through the centre of the fork tube. So what we'll do is we'll turn a steel rod which goes inside that, and we'll join the two pieces together. Obviously we'll have a nice weld prep on both ends of the fork stem, which will catch the it'll form a nice weld in the V prep, and then we'll probably put some additional holes through and just plug weld that just for extra strength, so there's never going to be any danger of that coming apart again. That will also provide a nice stable and square fixture to get these forks back in the correct alignment. We're also going to remove about 35mm out of the fork leg itself. Again, we'll probably use the same technique where it'll have an internal rod just to give it some strength, and a V weld or V prep in the two pieces of fork tube which are going to be joined back together. That weld will then be ground off, so you won't be able to tell where that's been welded. Not that it'll matter, because it'll have this spoiler cover on there to cover everything that's been done there. Mudguard, we're contemplating whether we should use that or not. You got any thoughts? Put it on a comment, let us know. We might use something from the later Primavera, which is a little bit smaller, or may end up cutting this down slightly, don't know yet. We're going to do away with the original radiators, and we're going to go for a curved radiator which is going to sit in this area here. So it's going to sit in a curved manner just in there. What we're going to do is we're going to open a port here to allow air to get in there. What we'll do is once this hole's been cut out, we'll then panel out this, if you can imagine E-type Jaguar, say for example, where it gets plated from the inside and have a nice leading edge. What you probably see on a lot of GP bikes these days. We may put some additional holes in here with some mesh, I'm not quite sure about that yet. It just depends how efficient the radiator cools, and we'll obviously do some tests before we go to paint, and if we need to have some additional openings here to allow for more air, then obviously we'll take care of that. These will get blanked out, the original holes will blank those out because they will no longer be required because the radiators won't be there anymore. So you can imagine 40mm off the top, 40mm out of the front steerer tube. Yeah, it's going to sit quite low as that. Don't forget you've got the back which will also be lower. So it's good and long. Next time you see this, it'll be cut and shunted. We'll try and put a timeline video on that so you can follow us doing the fabrication on that. We've got those two holes to fill in on the back. We'll more than likely dip the frame, but we'll only probably dip it from this point forward. obviously we can't dip the back end anymore because that's been filled and blended, so we won't want to start having to do that again. Today we're just going to have a quick look at what we've been up to. Been rather busy this week. We've had quite a few engines to convert on the GTS, the 26 horsepower package that we do. I'll shortly show you some of the engines that have come in, show you what we've been up to. Most of the progress this week has been on exhaust design and development. I'll just show you a few key components of what we've been doing in terms of the exhaust design. So follow me and let's get to it. Let's have a look what we've got in store for you today. See down here we've got a load of engines which we've in the process of converting to 26 horsepower conversions. We've also got a couple of cylinder heads that we're doing. Do these in pairs, which tend to be the most economical way of doing these cylinder heads. We've just got the blue trace on at the moment, engineering blue. All the ports have basically been taken out with a tungsten bit. This one here in particular has got a right contour to shape the ports. So we're going basically take all the casting marks out, all the roughness on the castings, and then we just go in and finish with a fine sanding drum. The idea of the engineer's blue is it gives us a trace to show us exactly where we're tracking in the ports, etc. Make sure we don't miss any of the machine surfaces. It's critical in this area here that we don't touch a valve seat. If we touch a valve seat with any of the tools, it pretty much becomes a useless piece of lump of material, because effectively if you damage that seat, to replace the seat it's doable, but it just becomes an expensive paperweight. So you've got to take a lot of care in this area. One slip of the die grinder and render this useless. So it's an extremely delicate job, especially in this area here. It takes a lot of skill and a steady hand to get that right, to avoid any slippages. Any slippages could be disastrous. Anyway, onwards and upwards. I'll just show you some of the exhaust components. This is going to be the downpipe, which will come off the cylinder and lead up into the expansion chamber. We started working the body. This will be the first prototype. We're just going to see how this fits. I've got a few more sections to go onto here. The leading entry and the rear cone. Some more sections to be added to that before we suspend this off a PM Tuning T-Sab hanging bracket. So that's all to come. Just have a quick look at the machine. You can see not a lot being done to that because I say we've been extremely busy. We've got the back end filled now. That's pretty much where it needs to be. See if we can get a better look at that without that white on it. See, that's looking quite sweet now. That's pretty much it for this week, so don't forget to subscribe as always. Click on that notification bell in the top corner if you haven't done that already. Next video will be next week. Hopefully we'll show you a little bit more.